This is the first lecture for the MBA module entitled Operations Management. It starts with a short introduction to myself, Peter Murray, and then goes on to give you a general introduction to the concept of operations management and the need for operations staff to take account of quality and the needs of the customer. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I obtained a PhD in chemistry many years ago and then spent 20 years working in several pharmaceutical companies. I started off as a development chemist and then moved into roles in information management and then planning and strategy. I then went back to university and have been teaching management for nearly 20 years. I've taught students at all levels, including undergraduates, masters and doctoral level. My management experience is fairly wide, since I've held senior management positions in private industry, in the UK National Health Service, in universities and in the voluntary sector. So I can talk about operations dealing with the production of both goods and services in a variety of contexts. I look forward to working with you on this course. So let's start with thinking about what operations are. Slack gives a handy definition which focuses on the resources, and as we shall see, these can be either the raw materials that go into the product or service, or the people and machines that produce the product or service. One word of warning: we talk about products, and that word can mean either physical products as opposed to intangible services, or a word to cover both physical goods as well as services. Make sure it is clear which use you are making of the word product when you use it in your assignment. Slack then makes a distinction between what he calls the core functions of a business and the support functions listed on the next slide. The core functions are marketing and sales, whose main role is dealing with customers, product service design, which includes research and development, who invent and develop new goods and services, and operations, who produce those goods and services. The support functions comprise technical, who provide engineering support to operations, accounting and finance, taking care of the finances, human resources, taking care of the staffing, and information systems, an increasingly important support function, providing the systems on which effective operations depend. Slack also makes a distinction between operations as a function and therefore comprising a particular and important part of the business, and operations as an activity, managing the processes in any part of the organization. The interaction of both core and the support functions are identified on this slide. Study this slide to reflect on the relationships between operations and each of the other functions. A very important approach to the processes in operations is to see the process as a transformation of several inputs into the output. This model works for both goods and services, and the inputs can be physical inputs like raw materials or sub-assemblies, or they can be inputs of staff time and skills, machinery, and even knowledge. On the next slide, this idea is explored in more detail. It shows that the output goes to the customer. This could be an internal customer, for example, the next process within the organization, or to an external customer, another organization who buy our output, which becomes one of their inputs, or of course, the final consumer. The inputs are of two kinds. First, there are transformed resources. These could be materials or information, but they could also be the customers themselves. Think of a hospital or a hairdresser. Then there are the transforming resources, either staff or equipment, who carry out the transformation. The transformation itself can be of various types, and more details are given in the iLearn materials. This brings us on to the issue of quality, which is fully discussed in the iLearn material. In fact, Slack lists 5 operations performance objectives, of which the first is quality. Quality means providing the customer, and especially the final consumer, with the product they want to the standard they expect. Speed means that the product should be delivered as quickly as the customer requires it. Dependability implies that the customer can trust the supplier to provide the product to specification in the timescale agreed. Flexibility is the ability for a supplier to meet changing customer requirements. Cost, of course, relates to providing the product at a reasonable cost, perhaps in comparison to the competition. I want you to see quality as an important performance objective, but not the only one. The next 3 slides will go into a bit more detail on quality. I've already explained that the customers of our process can be either internal or external. One of the foundations of the quality movement is the need to treat other parts of your organization as customers who require the same sort of service as an external customer might expect. Clearly, an external customer has a hold on its suppliers and would expect those suppliers to achieve Slack's performance objectives if they wish to continue to receive business. Another important concept is the idea of value. Here the focus is not on the cost of carrying out the transformation, but rather whether the customer values the transformation sufficiently to pay that cost. So one may look at any process and ask whether the value it adds, as perceived by the customer and the final consumer, is greater than the cost of the process. If this is not the case, the process clearly needs to be improved. To give more detail on what the customer sees as quality, and therefore justifies the extra cost by adding value, is summarized on the next slide. Daniel Garvin, in a celebrated article in Harvard Business Review, identified 8 dimensions of quality. I'm sure you will notice that several of these are the same or similar to Slack's performance objectives, but it is worth highlighting a few new ones. Features, and that is whether your product has better characteristics than your competitor, ideally for a similar price. Durability, will the product last for a significant time? What is the risk of obsolescence? Aesthetics, does the product look good? Perceived quality, does the customer perceive it as a quality product? Equally important is a list from Parasuraman and others who identified 10 elements of service quality. Since even a physical product will contain some elements of service, think about speed of delivery or customer support and things like that, it is important that operations managers understand these requirements. Let me finish this lecture with 2 issues that will become important for your assignment. The first is the importance of using theory in your assignment. Much of operations seems to be common sense, but as Kurt Lewin is supposed to have said, nothing is more practical than a good theory. So you need to be conscious as you work through the units that there are many theories relevant to improving the performance of operations. As is the case in other areas of your MBA, theory helps you to structure your ideas and to make sense of whatever problem you may be dealing with. Theory will give you ideas as to how to improve a process, and in writing your assignment it is essential that you show that you understand and use relevant theory. The second is the idea of a process map. Most texts will give you an explanation of such a map. The main thing is to be able to draw out a process step by step, so that you can then understand what is going on and hopefully use theory to improve it.